Chapter 4. Andy was a smart girl. Smart enough to know not to give me any trouble after what she'd just seen. She got into the front seat of my Blazer when I wordlessly directed her to do so. Blue gave a little whimper of submission when she saw me. She could smell the wolf near the surface. And she moved back to let Andy have the front seat. I was in no state to trust the girl enough to let her sit behind me as I drove. I'd be okay for now. The bullet could wait. My side burned, but the bleeding had already stopped, a benefit of having had the wolf so close to the surface. I'd almost killed that woman Rita. It had been so close. Things could so easily have gone the other way. It made me feel sick. I stopped at the driver's side door for a moment and emptied my stomach into the wet snow. The muscle spasms made the pain worse, but I compartmentalized the sensation and kept it away from my other self. I was overcome again by the unnerving sensation of being watched. The wolf had washed away the opiate shield I'd been hiding behind, and I felt exposed. I kept my eyes on the ground. I didn't want to see the specters that I was certain were staring at me. I got into the Blazer and immediately found my bottle of Vicodin. I emptied it into my mouth and choked them down. Andy looked at me with a queer expression, but didn't say anything. I glanced back at her. "Say something. I dare you." She looked away. Blue came up from the back seat and lay protectively across Andy's lap. She looked up at me and whined softly. I started the Chevy and we drove out of the trailer park in silence, headed for the interstate. Minutes later, we passed two bikers in Los Perdidos patching, heading the other direction, back to Edison Court. They were in for disappointment. Andy ducked as they passed us. I turned my head as they passed. I don't have a rear-view mirror, and saw that one had the full patch and rockers on his back. "Friends of yours?" I said, finally breaking the silence. She shrugged. "Who are they?" "Just a couple of guys I know." She avoided the question. "I'm sorry," I said. "I must have accidentally given you the impression that I'm a patient man having a good day." She took the hint. "That's Rudy and Lodi. That was Rudy's house. He's Rita's guy." I nodded. It fit. Rudy had been the guy on the phone. "They were going to get rid of you," I said. "I know. I need to find a new place to stay." "No," I said. "They were going to kill you. Rudy called Rita about it right before I got you. That's why she was trying to make you stay." She didn't say anything for a moment. I could practically hear the wheels turning in her head. She wanted to know how I had known about the phone call. Had the phone been bugged? It was a reasonable assumption. Blue must have picked up on the girl's anxiety. She licked at her hand reassuringly. That surprised me. Blue is a sweet dog, but doesn't often show that side of herself to strangers. Andy stroked the dog's muzzle gratefully. "What's her name?" she asked. "Blue." "She's sweet," she said. "Yeah," I grunted. She found the spot behind Blue's ear, her favorite spot to be scratched, and the dog slapped the seat with her happy tail in appreciation. "Are you a cop?" "Do I look like a cop?" I asked. "No." We drove in silence a little longer, and I left her to her thoughts. Her smell was distracting me. Lavender, vanilla, and that puzzling Vardant scent that made me think of springtime. It was nice. Too nice, and the wolf wasn't entirely settled. I didn't need the distraction. "Do you know how to roll a cigarette?" "I know how to roll a joint," she said. Same idea. I reached into a pocket and gave her the pouch of tobacco and papers. Her fingers were cold. "Roll me one." She froze for a moment after our hands touched and looked at me again, like she was seeing something else that she hadn't seen before. "What?" I asked. "It's nothing," she said, and turned her attention to the job I'd given her. She nimbly rolled a cigarette with both hands, nice and tight. Better than I could do it. I took it and lit it, cracking the window a little for her benefit and turning on the heat. "Can I have one?" she asked. "Suit yourself," I said, lighting it for her after she finished rolling. "Thanks." She took a drag and coughed hard. Most people had a hard time without filters. "Do you think that's good for the baby?" I asked. She almost dropped the cigarette along with her jaw. "What?" she stammered. I didn't answer. She ground out her smoke in the blazer's unused ashtray. "What are you?" she asked, wide-eyed. "Just a guy doing a job," I said. "What job?" "You've got court. I'm making sure you show up." Now she smelled afraid. Not of me, but afraid. "So you're like, what, a bounty hunter?" she asked. I shrugged. I finished my cigarette as we drove south on the interstate. We passed a couple of small towns in silence. Andy settled herself by stroking Blue. The dog twitched her tail contentedly and pretended to sleep. "So, do you have a name?" Andy asked. "Yeah." She rolled her eyes at me. "Are you going to tell me what it is?" "No." She glared at me, unafraid. "Holy shit, are you bleeding?" I'd stopped bleeding before I'd gotten into the driver's seat, but she noticed the blood on my shirt and pants. Rita's bullet had missed my field jacket, luckily, but the jacket had opened enough now that the wound was just visible to the teenaged girl. "It's fine," I said. She stared at me, disbelieving. "What?" I said. "Those scratches on your face," she said, pointing at the marks Rita had left when she'd jumped on me. "They were bleeding a few minutes ago. Now they look old, like they happened days ago." I didn't say anything. "What are you?" she asked again, but still didn't seem scared of me. Strange girl. I didn't answer. She looked at me like she was studying me, like she saw something. I wondered what she thought she saw, but I didn't want to talk any more than I had to. She'd already seen too much, and I didn't want to give her anything else to remember about me. The cigarette was out, and her smell was beginning to distract me. "Roll me another one, kid," I said. She stared at me stubbornly. "What's your name?" she finally said. I sighed. "Frank." "Oh," she said, and turned away. I could smell the change in her attitude. Something was making her skin crawl. She started to roll another cigarette with her long, nimble fingers. "What?" I asked her as I lit the cigarette. She shrugged. "Spit it out." "It's just... I really don't like that name," she said, obviously thinking of somebody else. "Ah," I said. "Me neither." She smiled. "What kind of name is Andy?" I asked. "Cassandra," she said. "It's short for Cassandra." We drove for about a half hour after leaving the trailer park. We didn't say much. I pondered who the hell this girl was, with her distracting smell and emerald fleck in her eye. Why could I see that? I wanted to look at those eyes again, to savor the color that had been lost to me for so many years. But I knew better than to meet her eyes. With the wolf this close to the surface, it would be an unkind thing to do to her. I pulled off the interstate in the city of Everett, where Mac had his offices. "Listen," she said, "can you just let me go? You don't have to bring me back." I shook my head no. "Please?" she begged. "I'll do anything?" She emphasized that last word in a clumsy but well-practiced attempt at seduction. It was clear to me what she meant. The kid had gotten used to trading her body for safety. Judging by the bruises on her face and the bikers ready to kill her, that hadn't been working out the way she'd hoped. She was pretty in a rough-and-tumble sort of way. More fierce than beautiful, but she was just a damn kid. The fact that she thought I might take her up on an offer like that made me angry. The fact that there was a part of me that liked the idea made me even angrier. She reached her hand out and rested it on my knee, creating a curious and pleasant warmth. I pushed her away, roughly. "Don't," I growled. We were getting close to Max. She was puzzling me. After everything she'd just seen, she should be scared to death of me. She was scared, but not of me. That wasn't right. I didn't get it. "Why aren't you scared of me?" I asked her. She looked at me again, with those strange eyes in that way of hers, like she saw something I couldn't. I didn't meet her glance, but I could feel the weight of those eyes on me. Then she smiled. It changed her face, that smile. She was still the same scrawny, bruised kid who had seen and done ugly things to get by. But there was a warmth there when she smiled. A fire that crept into her mismatched eyes and made them sparkle. "Why do you want me to be?" she asked. The kid had guts. Against my better judgment, I decided that I liked her. I pulled the car into an alley and parked in front of an old house not far from the train station. A blue neon sign read, "Watson Bail Bonds." We were there. He must have been watching for us because the side door opened and the familiar shape of Mac Watson walked down the 3 steps. Blue recognized him. She sat up and started to whine excitedly, one paw pressing against the window. I saw Max suddenly as Andy must see him, struck by how old and fat he'd become. I'd first known him when he'd been young and fit, a Negro soldier in a segregated unit who still had both of his hands. The old bearded man in front of me breathed heavily just from walking down the stairs. His prosthetic left hand tucked into his coat pocket, as usual. His bushy white beard and prominent gut suited him well each winter when he dressed up as Santa Claus for the local foster kids. He'd practically been a kid when I met him, not much older than Andy. But now, he looked like a grandfather. "Kid," I said, "Mac is a good guy. You don't have to be scared." I didn't know what I was doing. I wanted to reassure the girl, but didn't know how. I put a hand on her shoulder. She stiffened. I pulled it back. I was bad at this. "You're clueless," she said as she angrily got out of the car. "Probably," I agreed under my breath. "Miss Morgan," Mac's deep voice greeted Andy. "I'm glad you could make it." She didn't answer. She just stared at her feet ashamedly. He stepped forward and got a good look at her bruised face, as good as he could get in the fading daylight. "God damn," he said with disgust. "Let's get you some ice, honey. Marilyn?" A handsome blonde woman in her 50s came to the door and briefly glared in my direction while I sat in the blazer and pretended not to see her. We had history. Blue hopped out and nuzzled Andy's hand in farewell. The girl took a knee and let the dog give her a proper kiss goodbye. "Bye-bye, Blue," she said to the dog. "Your father is going to be here soon, Andy," Max said. Go inside with Marilyn, and she'll get you something to eat while you wait." Andy continued to watch her feet as she walked reluctantly inside and didn't object as Marilyn ushered her into the building with a motherly hand on her back. Blue shimmied excitedly to Mac, who smiled and gave her his real hand to lick. "Hey there, girl," Mac said, in the voice that grown men reserve only for dogs and small children. "How you doin', Blue? Still hanging around with this loser?" Mac thinks he's funny. Always did.